All right, welcome to the Real Estate Without Borders podcast with myself, Dave Hutchinson, and Mr. Daniel Foch. Today, I have an exciting episode for you. We're going to be debating the two countries closest to the U.S. that are the best to invest in, potentially. Mexico versus Canada. So that's our episode for you today.
You went with a hybrid there, Mexico.
I was going with
actually,
Dave.
Mexicanada is a great restaurant in Bradford, Ontario, actually.
Bradford, Ontario.
Yeah,
I've never been.
Yeah, so I guess for context, I'll start off here, Dave. You put this awesome stat in the notes. So over 60% of international investors cite diversification and higher returns as the top motivations for investing abroad. And I think we're in like an era where the U.S. market seems to be ripping, like running so hot, right? That you can't help but think, I might want to manage a little bit of downside risk here, right? Especially with like what just happened with DeepSeek and the AI stuff. I don't even following that, right? But like the U.S. stock market is basically like the Mag 7, which is like your 7 big tech companies. And they're all super heavily exposed to AI. And then China just came out with this thing called DeepSeek, which they basically said they built it for like $6 million or something like that. Yet like, OpenAI spent like tens of billions. And so everyone's like, oh man, if China's like telling the truth on this, which who knows, right? Like that's where it's kind of, you never know, but then that's probably going to change the AI world a little bit on Monday for the stock market. So and we're recording this Jan 26. So Monday being probably in the past at this point, but all of this to say, is there, a black swan or something that could pull the US into a bit more recessionary territory? Yeah, maybe. Do you want to diversify away from that? Yeah, maybe. What's the easiest way to do that? Well, one of the easy ways to do that is to buy into other countries that have already been smoked, right? Like the US just is the only place on earth that hasn't been smoked by the economy yet, right? So that's a big one from my perspective. But I don't know. Give me some other thoughts here on why diversification is key, and then we can dive into Mexico versus Canada.
Well, you get to own property in warm climates. Let's go with that one. Nice and easy.
Warm climates like Canada.
See, I'm just trying to pad my stats for the Mexico battle here. For me, look, the US dollar is strong right now versus other currencies. So you have that option, which is going to come back to just end up getting you discounts wherever you're buying, depending, obviously. Yeah, look, I can dive into Mexico, and I've been here now for a year, pretty much straight. Honestly, I came back a little bit in the summer to Canada, but to get into Mexico and why I think it's a great investment for Americans. Most of my clients that invest here are American. I would say like 95% of my clients are American investors looking to diversify outside of America, and they end up landing on Mexico. And I've been selling in Tulum, Playa del Carmen, and Cancun specifically. So I can give some examples as to why I think it's an incredible investment with real case studies, real stories, real numbers, and go from there. Do you want me to dive into that there, Foch, or do you want me to?
Yeah, why don't you sell me on Mexico here, and then I'll try and give Canada a pitch. Although I still think, sure. I think both countries have come down quite a bit in price, but I think Canada's probably still got a bit more downside risk because we are heading into a recession, and Trump tariffs are probably going to exacerbate that if they take place. So, I will caveat with that, but yeah, let's go.
What's the temperature outside at your place?
It is -2. It's actually warm today. That would be warm.
That is.
And that's, yeah. I guess we got to figure out we got to get all our American metrics going too, eh? So what's that? It's like 30. Yeah.
27 in Tulum. Reason 1. There we go. What's that Celsius? What's temperature in Celsius? Oh no, Fahrenheit. Let's see here. 80 degrees.
It's so it'd be 35 here.
Let me sell you a property that I really believe in here because it's a real one. We've covered it in the past. You know what? I'm gonna do a different one. I'm gonna do a different one that I'm just gonna free ball here because I like this one. It's actually a condo that I own, so I'm biased, maybe a little bit. I have
offloading.
I could offload. No, I'm not gonna offload it. Actually, I have a tenant who's paying me decent right now. Okay. Oh, that's another good point. Put it in the think tank. So I have a property. It's a 1-bedroom. It's about 850 square feet. Private pool on the terrace overlooking the jungle. List price $240,000 US. I would say average per night US dollar on Airbnb would be 150 with like a 55% occupancy rate, but long-term tenants are willing to pay between 15 and 1800 US dollars per month for a 1-year contract. So that's the subject property that I'm going to sell you right now. So let me explain Tulum. So why this is a good investment for American investors. One, the peso is, well, the US dollar is what, $1 to what's the peso? It's 20.7, I think. USD to peso. 20.27. Okay. This property could be sold to you in pesos, which is incredible for you, giving you probably like a 30 to 40K US dollar discount on the price. Next, we have.
And I will add actually that the peso has been the second most resilient currency against the USD. So I'll give you some extra points there on the exchange.
Thanks, Anita. That's important. Next, we have the ability to take full crypto or full cash, which is not really easy to do. So we'll stick to the crypto. A lot of the developers down here will take cryptocurrency as a form of payment. Some only 30%, but we do have a few that are able to do 100% crypto payments. Now,
it's been popular for all the. I bet that's good for the culture.
XRP,
get all the Miami crypto bros down there.
Yeah, there's too spiritual in Tulum, man. They don't come down here. It's too much zen. So then we go take crypto at minimum down payment 30%. Now, the cool thing is a lot of developers are pretty flexible down here because although Tulum and Mexico, I'll say Tulum because I keep saying Mexico. Mexico's a massive country. I'm going to specify Tulum in the Quintana Roo state. They're fairly flexible with how you can negotiate your deals. For example, what a recent client of mine just did was put 30% down, took possession of the property, was able to begin earning Airbnb money or short-term rental money or use the property for their own personal use and pay the remaining 70% back over a year and a half in monthly installments with 0% interest just to the developer. A lot of the developers that are like offloading remaining inventory, let's call it, are super flexible and willing to give possession without full payment. You don't get title and deed until full payment, but it's still a good way for you to get into a place with 30% down, start earning income right away without having to pay the full 100%, which you could use that money to put back into the, pay your own property off essentially, which is really, really cool.
You mentioned title and deed. Can I interrupt you there?
Of course.
So one of the big concerns I think like people have with buying real estate in Central America, Latin America, et cetera, is like, there's been examples like I think in Guatemala, like a government like stole property from like Vale Inco,
Mm-hmm.
like, so that's a big, massive company, right?
For sure.
And like, I not that I think this would happen in Mexico, but like I won't even make you speculate about whether or not that's like a risk, but what is the structure of like of title? What is the structure of like a land registry, like in comparison to the US? Because one of my key points is going to be, you buy a property in Canada, it's very similar process wise to the US, right? You bought it with a realtor, you got a lender who registered on title, you've got title, you can go into land registry and see that, et cetera. Like, where are you guys at with that in Mexico?
To wet my whistle for this rebuttal.
Oh yeah, I see you hydrating for this response. I'm in trouble here.
No, it's not as complicated as you'd think, but there's a lot of misinformation about this out there. So when you're buying a property in Mexico within 50 kilometers of the coastline, and I think it's 100 kilometers of any border, foreigners can't own property under your own personal name to an extent. So as a foreigner, you can't own property within 50 kilometers of the coastline. Most foreigners, obviously, when they're buying in Mexico, want to own by the coastline. You want to be by the beach. So you own through a fideicomiso, which is a trust account. And I can get into this in super detail, but honestly, it's actually pretty simple. You would own the trust account. The trust account would be the owner of that property. And that trust is held at a Mexican bank. It's a Mexican trust, not an American trust. Okay, so you would create the Mexican trust. You would be the sole owner of that trust, and that trust would be the owner of that property, held at a bank of your choice. Typically, the bank varies from whoever is offering the best rates. Because to own the fideicomiso, the trust account, there is an annual fee of about $1,500 to $2,500 US dollars, depending on the bank. And then it's a 50-year in length trust with the option to extend. Okay? It's not a land lease. A lot of people come up with this thing where they think it's a land lease. I've heard information that you need a Mexican citizen on title. It's not the case. You're the sole owner. You can own. A lot of my American clients will do it under their corp. So their American corp will own the Mexican trust, which owns the property. Did I answer that okay?
That was a good answer. Yeah, I guess so. You're kind of, you have to be putting also a little bit of faith in the banking system in Mexico as well. I guess you would be doing that in any place you're buying because you'd be buying with a mortgage, so you kind of want to make sure that the bank is. Yeah, okay, that's fair.
I've heard of people, if the bank, let's say, because we have credit unions in Mexico too. So let's say for whatever reason you put your trust in a Mexican, B lender type bank, and the bank would go under. All they would do is, I've never had this happen, knock on wood, but I've heard it's not a problem. All you would do is just change your trust to a different bank. The biggest banks here are like BBVA and Santander, Intercam. So some people choose to go with that route off the hop, and you pay a little bit more on that annual fee, but you have a bit more stability in terms of it's very unlikely that banks can go under.
And then like if I wanted to, I guess like a lot of the stuff you're selling and like a lot of the product down there in like Tulum specifically is like condo, but if I own a detached house, like can I go on like Geo Warehouse and look at my lot lines in Mexico? Like, is that a thing? Like, cause that's,
No,
yeah. Like,
you
and then
can.
so I get a deed, like what do I own? You know what I mean? Like, how's that
Good
all?
question.
Yeah.
So it depends. Most people, when they're buying it, most Americans, when they're buying in Mexico, would like to own within like gated communities. It's not there. I do sell villas, like freehold villas that are on their own property line with, no HOA fees. It's just you strictly own that land. We actually saw one today as well. When you buy a property, like a freehold standalone house, villa, we like to call them, you would then, yes, own the land and know your land lines and everything because you would be buying that plot of land with the house on it. Okay. However, most of the American clients that I work with, they're coming here to invest and potentially spending like, maybe a couple weeks here, a year or something like that. So because of that, what's appealing is to buy in a gated community. When you're buying in a gated community, you're buying into like an HOA. So it'd be like a condo town type situation where you'd pay monthly payments that you wouldn't have. You'd be buying the house on the already existing owned property, but you do sign title and deed. You're the owner of that property. You do all the paperwork like that. Same with condos.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, that's all I needed to know in regards to deed and stuff like that. Because I was curious. It seems to be one of the big issues with like, investing outside of the U.S. Like you got in the U.S. and in Canada. Well, I think anything that sort of came from that European, like, British imperial or like, whatever, like they already had these like existing land registry systems, surveys, etc. that seem to have been phased into like all of the colonial places.
Right.
I just don't know if that, like most Central American or South American places haven't, or Latin American places have. It's a little different, right? That was my thought.
Sure. I think so. I don't want to be all positive here. I'll give you some advantages here, just in case I do lose this battle. I think the one downfall we're seeing in this part of Mexico, which would be like the Quintana Roo, which is a state within Mexico, which is like most commonly Cancun, Playa del Carmen, and Tulum. There is no successful MLS system in place. So what can be challenging right now is resale. The reason why it can be somewhat challenging is because it's difficult to get your property known to the public that it's for sale. You're heavily relying on.
Feels like a market opportunity.
I've thought about it forever. It's something that I really want to crack into because the problem is it's hard to get your property known that it's for sale. You're relying heavily on local realtors to put it on their websites. Way to share properties here, honestly, is like WhatsApp groups.
Right.
So it's like how many times can you post?
It's like your condo assignment or like pre-con. Yeah.
Exactly like
interesting.
That. How it's a challenge.
We should just create one. We should talk to the guys at Valerie and just create an MLS. It would be, I feel like it would be that hard.
It would be the biggest. And I think right now is a great time for that because you have. I'm not sure. I don't even remember what episode we spoke about it, but we were at the peak and now we're kind of stabilized here in Tulum, and a lot of people bought at the peak, and they're trying to either offload that property because they've made a little bit of money now, maybe made $50K, $100K, and they want to offload and maybe buy more. But it's a challenging process for sure.
Yeah.
Not impossible, but challenging.
I feel like that'll improve though as the area like develops, right? Like you're almost buying like an emerging market.
Tulum's brand
Yeah.
new, Tulum, and it's the one thing that's kind of I've been selling here. I mean, like super aggressively this year. But the one thing that's challenging is we don't have historical data like we do in Canada.
Yeah.
I can't go online and look at what sold 15 years ago because there was nothing. There still isn't. So it's like all we can do when we're analyzing Tulum is look at other markets like Cancun and Playa del Carmen and analyze certain things like land size, what's happening in the area. I know Tulum just got an international airport, train station, all that kind of stuff. So, we just have to look at like telltale signs of where the market's going. But yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess I don't know if I have another like that many other like questions in regards to it.
Carrying costs are low here. Like, the average carrying cost, property tax, depending on lot size, is super cheap, under $1,000 a year. Insurance is, a lot of people think insurance here is expensive because they're kind of comparing it to Florida.
Right.
But our home insurance here is max $1,500 annually.
Right.
Which is
There's
good.
not like a lot of natural disasters there anyway, right? Like you get a hurricane or whatever, like Florida every once in a while.
We're kind of tucked in. We're tucked in like the peninsula a little bit.
What's the sentiment on like political stability down there, with the government plus like, I guess like cartels, like they're, they seem to be kind of running the place more than the government probably, right? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think in terms of like safety and the government stability, I can't talk too much on terms of like government stability, truthfully.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the cartel and what they're doing here, I think, look,
It's really
they
only an
own a
issue
lot
for people who are involved in that probably, right?
Yeah, like they own all the restaurants and the clubs, and they do their thing down here. There's organized crime all over the world, and these
Well,
guys.
Canada's got to be like the money laundering capital of the world. So like,
That's right.
to say like I wouldn't even like I'm not even saying it to art like to say
Yeah.
that it's like a plus or minus versus. I mean, if anything, maybe it's a better thing. Like because people,
Right.
like they're pretty good at like there's an economy that exists there, right?
Right.
Like one of the cities that we invest in, there's a lot of contraband like crosses the border in that city. And this
What
is in
city?
Canada. I'm not going to say it because I don't want to talk too much about it. But like but what like I think there's speculation that like the majority of like contraband that crosses Canada-US border takes place in that city. Basically, the town's like GDP or like economic productivity is like low, right? Like on paper.
Right.
But then there's like this whole like probably like 25% of the economy is like
Right.
not on paper. It's just money that and I think in Mexico it's like kind of comparable, right? It's like Mexico does this much like from a GDP perspective. It's like, well, the cartels are probably producing more than the GDP of Mexico in drug exports right now. It does seem like Trump obviously has taken a little bit of issue with that. So that that would be probably my only like headwind for political instability when I think about Mexico in that regard is what's the US going to do when they talk about that whole thing, and who knows, right? But I think Canada's kind of the same. Like you look at like when Trudeau got elected here, like foreign capital basically just stopped investing in Canada, or like it started declining like majorly. So
when would you say that started in Canada? Like when would you say that whole down? Go for it.
Yeah, well, there's this chart. I gotta find it. This guy showed me this chart about like basically, it basically showed like foreign investment in it was from Carney's. I'm gonna find this. This was like literally from Carney's, one of Carney's decks. Carney. So for context, anybody who's listening, and because this is kind of relevant to the context of political stability in Canada, and I guess we can kind of segue into that. So this guy did this thread. Give me a sec. It's about like this deck from Carney. I'm trying to find it because it's
like Carney taking over Trudeau.
Yeah, Mark Carney. Yeah. Sorry. So for context for anybody who's listening, while I try and find this, basically Mark Carney is like he's a like former central banker. So he ran the Bank of Canada. He also ran the Bank of England, and then he now works in like large like infrastructure companies as an ex central banker would, right? So he's like super rich, like he's part of like the like quote unquote the global elite, you might say. And he's just going to run Canada probably. Like that's his goal here, right? I still don't think he'll win the election, but he's probably the candidate who the Liberal parties are most likely to elect. Yeah, and probably it seems the Conservative Party is most afraid of.
When's the election? When are they going to appoint?
They still haven't called it. Yeah, they still haven't called it. They're like, because Trudeau's kind of delaying it with this whole thing, right? I can't find this thread this guy put out, but anyway, I'm gonna find it next time you're talking. I'll spend a little bit of more time on it. But yeah, so like, I don't know, is political stability really a thing? And again, like foreign direct investment in Canada kind of dropped when Trudeau got elected because people said like, oh, this is probably a country that isn't going to really respect capital, right? And that ended up being true. So, you know, and then at the same time, you kind of had a lot of capital controls coming out of China, which is our primary source of foreign direct investment. Like the most money that comes into Canada actually comes from China, not the US, into real estate. So yeah, that, like, to me, those factors are probably more of a vulnerability than the factors that you and I just discussed in a place like Mexico, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think, like, you know, it's, what was the question I had? Like, you know, Canada's definitely a stable, you know, safe bet for the American investor. When you're investing in Canada, you know, it's a little more stable. Whereas Mexico, high reward, you know, I think the numbers here are amazing. But like you said, political stability, with this whole new thing with Trump and tariffs and all this stuff, trying to bring businesses back to the US, I don't know. But the numbers here right now, yeah, are, you found
I
it.
found the chart. Yeah,
you found it.
This is like, it's so like, this is like the chart just tells the stories. So this is like, if you look at 2015, basically the Trudeau election, this
crazy.
is real private non-residential investment. So this is basically capital being put into things other than housing. And this is from the OECD. And this is from Carney's, like, this guy did a thread on this document from Carney
OECD
that says,
office?
no, it's a Office of Economic something. It's like a global group of countries that, like,
let me find this out.
Put their data together for global analysis purposes. We're going to reference them a lot on the show, Dave. You just don't know it yet.
Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what it is.
Perfect. I knew that.
So yeah, so Carney, then a switch. So this guy did a thread, but Carney basically put together this document for the group of 30, G30. And it says push, pull, pipes, sustainable capital flows for a new world order, which is, you know, it's like a moment. Yeah, I thought you're not supposed to talk about that, Mark. Anyway, the guy's obviously like super bright, man. Gets money, gets economics, etc. But yeah, just Canada has not really seen a ton of investment in their country as a result of political shifts, and whereas before and now that I think that the Western world seems to be moving further right, you know, you could probably see that change. So you have political stability to the downside, where if you end up seeing more destructive economic policies, more inflationary policies like the Liberals were doing, then maybe you'll see less and less faith in Canada's economy and less money coming into the country. If we see a switch back to more conservative policy, you know, destroying inflation rather than creating it,
right,
then you could see a shift into money being moved into Canada and growth in that regard. So I think political stability happens in both countries.
So you're up, man. Tell me Canada as a U.S. investor.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big thing that we hear in Canada is that we have a housing shortage, right? And so, like, you know, in the U.S. you hear about this a lot too, right? You hear that, you know, oh, we need more houses, or like housing crisis and all this stuff. I want you to just take that, like, and add a 0 to the end of it. Like, that's what I would say. Honestly, though, like, I mean, you know, in the U.S., it's like there's a lot of there's a growing negative sentiment towards migration, immigration, population growth, etc. In Canada, the same thing took place, similar to a lot of European nations that had like really open immigration policies. Canada had the fastest growing population in the Western world for like the past 3 years. Okay, was the fastest growing population from an advanced economy for the last 3 years. There was a point in time where Canada was literally the third fastest growing place on earth, other than like Syria and South Sudan, which are like, Syria was because everybody was moving back after that huge war, and South Sudan was because, well, they have a super high birth rate still, because a lot of African nations still do have that. And none of our population, by the way, we have the lowest birth rate that we've ever had in Canada. And
what's
so
our birth
all
rate?
this, that's like, I don't know. It's like, I don't know. Honestly, I can't remember. It's like 0.7 or something like that. It's like brutal, dude. Like Canadians aren't having kids because they can't afford to.
Right.
So we're growing our population basically by bringing international students in a lot of cases, bringing temporary foreign workers, and bringing people from all over the world to come to Canada who are in search of a better life. And so Canada's population is growing. So I would say that if you're an international real estate investor, you probably would like to get exposed to housing, multifamily housing, especially in Canada, because that's all you can buy as a US investor buying Canadian real estate.
Because the ban is still in effect. It was supposed to end, right? It was supposed to end. They extended
it
it.
was supposed to, but they renewed it. Yeah, I think it wouldn't surprise me if when Pierre gets in, he gets rid of that. It's a pretty easy way for them to stimulate the economy or the housing market, let's say. But, really, from my perspective, we have a structural deficiency of number of houses, and so in the U.S., like you're used to seeing cities that have a vacancy rate of like 6%, 7%, right? In Canada, like our national vacancy rate for real estate is like 2%. Okay. There are cities that have 0% vacancy rates. And so your rents were growing like 10% year over year. They're now declining and vacancy rates are going up, but they're going up from like 2% to like 4%. Right. So, and eventually we'll get back to what's happening right now in Canada is basically the government has pledged to reduce the population of non-permanent residents. So you're seeing a lot of people leaving the country.
Is that why
And
sorry to cut you off? Is that why you think the vacancy rate is rising from?
Yeah, 100%, man, 100%. Like they're, and I predicted this earlier in the year, right? I said like as soon as I saw rents rolling over, I was like, people are leaving. People are already leaving, and the government's going to go in and take credit for it, and they did, like almost instantly, man. They're so predictable, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
But anyway, so all of that to say, I think that the moment that we're in right now in Canada is like that moment where you're almost at that really good time to buy. If you got rents falling, prices falling, interest rates falling, like the market is almost in like it's like despair moment that you see the bottom. It's not there yet, but it's far closer to a bottom, and it is like hurtling towards it. That compared to the US, right? In the US, it's like, yeah, we're still kind of thinking about like a top market, still crushing it. Nobody's buying and selling. So like, there's still a supply scarcity because nobody wants to sell their houses that they got with like 3% 30-year mortgage rates. Like, why would they, right? They'd rather just do a renovation or something.
Because maybe we can touch on like the mortgage, because whenever I spoke at Inman this year in New York, and I spoke with an Australian guy about the differences of owning between Canada and the US, and in Australia. Anyways, maybe speak on the mortgage terms, because I don't think they'd maybe like explain simply. Yeah. That's why no one's moving in the US.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, in Canada, basically, so it's funny because whenever you explain Canadian mortgages to Americans, they're like, are you guys idiots? And we're like, well, we don't have a choice. So basically, in the US, I mean, the USD is so strong. It's like the best currency in the world. Everybody wants it, right? So in the US, the government can issue 30-year mortgage bonds and people will buy them. In Canada, they can't do that because nobody wants to buy 30-year exposure to the Canadian dollar. That's basically the nuts and bolts of why we don't have 30-year mortgages in Canada. We have 10s, we have 15s, but the rates are so high because, again, in order to convince an investor to buy a 15-year exposure to Canadian dollar, they want like 6-7% return on those bonds. So the mortgage rates are high. In Canada, we're kind of stuck with 5-year mortgages. And so in the US, if you remember like 2006, 2007, the option ARM mortgage rates, right, were basically people or adjustable rate mortgages. So basically you'd get a mortgage from the bank, and then 5 years would go by, and then your mortgage rate would be different, or X amount of period of time would go by, and then your mortgage rate would be different, and it would jump up in that case. That's Canada's mortgage environment. Like all of our mortgages are basically ARMs, right? They're all basically adjustable rates. We have variable rates, which change whenever the Bank of Canada changes their rate. But then we have fixed rates, which are fixed for a period of like 1 to 5 years, and then they change. And you don't know what rate you're going to be. It depends on what the interest rate environment and the bond market's doing 5 years from now. So this is why Canadians are getting smoked, because a lot of people got mortgages in 2021 when prices were super high and rates were super low. And now they have to renew, and they're renewing, they're going from a 1% interest rate to a 5%.
I was gonna say,
and basically 1.5% to 5%.
Yeah, when I bought my condo in Toronto, the one that I still is my primary, I got in at 1.6 interest rate, and then my mortgage was I think it was like 3,200. I ended up going up to like 5,500 at one point, and now it's kind of hovering around 38. But that's why Canadians are in a bit of a pickle.
Yeah,
as you said.
it's among the reasons why. Yeah, I mean, and so
One of
we've
them.
got in Canada, we've got unemployment rising. You know, we've got the population falling, rents falling, prices falling, etc. So to me, like these all sound like bad things, but to me, like you want to buy when things are bad, right? Because when they get better, and in the U.S., there's no bad metrics like that, not as many, right? In certain smaller markets.
And your dollar is that's a huge factor.
Yeah, so the Canadian dollar dropped from basically like, I think it was like peaked during the COVID or like in the last couple of years from, I think it was like 78 cents. And now it's at 70 cents right now, but like, let's go back to, well, let's go back all the way to like 2008, right? So 2008, the Canadian dollar was above the US dollar. It was like 105 USD. That's basically it was basically over the US dollar from like 2010 to like 2013, or like almost at parity with the US dollar during that period of time. And then, well, actually, even leading up to 08, it was like, you know, again, like 90 cents. So you know what the Canadian dollar was capable of doing with the right leadership and the right economy and all of these things, right? Let's fast forward to like COVID, you know, kind of modern economy, 2021. You've got like a 83-cent Canadian dollar. Okay. This is like June of 2021. You know, 2023, you're looking at like 74 cents, 76 cents. And now we're at 70 cents. So if you buy right now, and then it goes back to 80 cents or whatever, you're not only are you getting exposure to the asset, but you're getting huge exposure to potential currency recovery against the USD, which to me is probably one of the best potential trades in Canada. Like, give us 8 years under a conservative government in Canada where we start diversifying back into oil and gas, resources, etc. Try and play a more meaningful role as the US's largest trading partner. And I see that as being an 80 cent, Canadian dollar environment. So if you hold real estate for that period of time, you buy it today at 70 cents. I think we'll probably see Canadian dollar like 68, 67 cents, honestly, within the next couple of quarters. You buy it at 67 cents, and then you're holding it for 10 years and you're back at 83 plus the, everything that's happened in the meantime. I think it's a good trade, right? The other thing is like, sorry, go ahead.
Is there a city specific you would like in Canada for the American listeners? Is it city specific that you would be put? I know that's
it's tough right now,
right?
Like if it was a little while ago, I would have said probably like Alberta, but I think Alberta's rolled over. Like you're seeing, but like a lot of people are piling into these like Edmonton multiplexes. So like here's a crazy thing. So you can buy like a pre-built sixplex, brand new. Okay, like builder will build you a row of townhouses with basement apartments, brand new, and you can buy that with 5% down, or you could. Now it's changing because CMHC is tightening on that policy.
Is it the MLI?
Yeah, exactly. But you knew as soon as the Toronto pre-con crowd was getting into that program, it was done. The opportunity was over, right? Like really, it was for sure. And you could see them doing it in Calgary last year, and Calgary vacancies jumped for like brand new products. So for new MLI product, jumped from like 2% to 7%, right? So all those investors are underwater, and it's going to happen to all the people doing it in freaking Edmonton now too. So don't buy there. I think a lot of like people in the US get this, right? They get buying real estate to get exposure to economic activity. So I would say buy in like the prairies where there's new mining projects, in Quebec where there's new mining projects, timber projects going in, right? There's so much, and if the government wants to do well, and if Pierre wants to run a growth scenario for Canada, the government's going to have to do so much spending on infrastructure. So I would say like, there are places in like rural Saskatchewan that you can buy where it's like the only town near a mine that just hired like thousands of people. Right. And like, I think it's BHP or BNP, like the huge mining company from Australia is like running this project. Like, so they've put billions of dollars into this. So if some massive multinational corporation is willing to put billions of dollars into this place, and Kirkland Lake's a good example in Northern Ontario, like Kirkland Lake Gold doubled their workforce. House prices in that town went from like 30 grand to like 100 grand. And
crazy.
You could, so I like all those markets, right?
Hold on, I'm going to interrupt you only because is that a CMA location or no?
No, so like that, exactly. Like that's a place where you could buy it because it's in a rural area. Like the town is like has like 1,000 people.
Yeah, so the foreign buyer ban for Americans would not be in place, and you would be able to buy there.
Correct. Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, so to me, like, those are the good opportunities for US people. They've actually been forced into the only good opportunities in Canada, which is buildings over 4 units and rural properties, like, you know, around. And so that's what I would be doing, to be honest. You can find that in every province pretty much. Northern Ontario has it, rural Quebec, Manitoba has it, BC has it in a lot of their areas up north, and beautiful communities too. Alberta, same thing. They're in rural Alberta. Even Red Deer is like decent. Like you look at Edmonton and Calgary are absolutely flying right now, and everybody's forgotten about Red Deer, right? And if like, look, we know Pierre, who's going to get prime minister likely this year. Pierre loves oil and gas, so he's going to send it for places like Red Deer, right? So that could be the one bull case for Alberta to avoid recession. And to Canada, I like a lot too. And oil and gas is huge in like Newfoundland. A lot of Americans like Montreal and Quebec City just because like they're awesome tourist cities. There's a decent strategy there. I would say pretty much you're safe if you're buying anywhere other than like Toronto and Vancouver. And even those markets I think will be pretty good buys eventually, but they just need to settle a little bit. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I don't have much to add to Canada, so we can just wrap it up there. I don't think we'll let the listeners decide, man. Yeah, we'll call it a tie. We'll let the listeners decide where would you rather invest. Leave us a review or slide into Dave's DMs, not mine. I can't find my messages as it stands. Send Dave a DM, say whether or not, and he can sell you properties in both countries. You know, tell him which one you think is better. Or if you think there's another country on earth that is a better place to invest as an American, I would love to hear about it because we would want to do an interview with somebody from that place to learn more about why it's such a good place to invest. So thanks for listening.